we have, okay, so we should start then. I see we have 23 people. Welcome everyone to the second session of the International Communal Studies Association first digital conference. And we've just finished our first session, and we've all learnt an awful lot about how to do this, and we are learning how to do this better all the time. I would ask people to switch their cameras on, and please write your name in Latin letters, rename. You just go into your box below, participants, and you rename yourself. One of the challenges with a session like this online is that it's very hard to get to know people. And there are two things that really are pretty basic if you want to get to know somebody. One is to be able to recognize them, and the other is that you should know their name. So if you would do that, then it would be better participation for everybody. And I'm just reminding you, we are 23 people. My name is Jan Martin Bang. I am Norwegian. I am participating from Norway. I have been involved with the ICSA since its very beginning, and I teach permaculture and eco-village design. And I'm very pleased to see many people who I know from before here. And I'd like Helen, if you could just say a couple of words about yourself and your role. I am chairing it, and Helen is doing what she's doing. Helen, please.
Yep. It is, as I said, I've just renamed myself. I'm just providing Zoom tech services. We're all here on Zoom, so you haven't had any problems joining. Please just use the chat, ask me any questions, or use the chat to connect with each other. I'm based in the UK at Newcastle University, and I'm on the board of ICSA. I'm not going to say anything more about myself because you need the time for your excellent presentations.
Right. Thank you, Helen. And Helen is also part of the organizing team here, and we've been meeting on this Zoom channel now for a long time, many times. I'd like to introduce Orna, Dr. Orna Shemer, one of the participants of this on this section. She's a senior lecturer at the School of Social Work at the Hebrew University. She's a member of the Altabenkin Research Committee, and she's a board member of the ICSA. And since the beginning of the war, she has been managing the headquarters of the families of hostages in her area in the south of Israel. She also guides community workers who work with the communities affected by the war, and she's engaged in developing knowledge about community resilience. So, Orna, I'm very pleased to have you on this session. Yaniv, are you here? I don't see.
Yes,
Yaniv.
I'm here.
Yes, thank you, Yaniv.
Yes, here I am.
You are from Kibbutz Be'eri. You are one of the survivors of October the 7th. And you are a community regional kibbutz advisor. So pleased to have you with us. And we actually do have some mutual friends and some pain there. So I will go on to Michal Shamai. Let's see, Michal, I'm trying to find you. Michal, hello, Michal. You are the community director of Mishmar Haemek, Kibbutz up north. And you are hosting survivors of the from Nachal Oz, survivors of the attack in October the 7th. And you work with trauma, dealing with trauma. So thank you for being here too. And Sara Shadmi, you are here somewhere. There you are, from the Varda Institute. I remember having many good conversations with you a year and a half ago in Denmark. It was a different world then. You actually are one of the inspirers for this session in one of our meetings of the ICSA in the last few months. You worked for the Varda International Institute together with Aaron, who was at the last session. And you've worked in communities in different places in the world, and you work on creating resilience. So welcome to our 4 speakers. And I don't know if I have an order. Who would like to introduce the subject of how intentional communities deal with the strengths and the challenges and the experiences of war and terrorism? And I think we have here a unique opportunity to see how this happens. So who would like to start off?
Orna is the
Orna,
moderator.
glad to have you there. Orna, please.
Orna is leading the session. She's supposed to guide the panel.
Yes.
You're in mute.
Unmute, please.
October 6th, Friday night, family Shabbat meal. Before we start eating, I share with my children that today is a difficult day for me, that I thought a lot about the fact that today is 50 years since Yom Kippur War. There was no doubt in my heart, such a terrible things will not happen to us again. We went to sleep peacefully. October 7th, Saturday, 6:99. The sirenas on the phone wakes me up. I open my eyes and see that half of the country is bombed. Shock, horror. Within minutes, we are also under fire. We wake up the children and run to take a shelter. From that moment, we are all in continuous nightmare. Between the alarms, we see so difficult images on television and cell phones. A horror film whose script is now being written before our eyes. Helplessness. There is no army. I have family in Kibbutz near the border. I have friends from there. We are exchanging short, worried messages with them. We worry and fear. Rumors say that the terrorists also managed to reach the area where I live, 40 kilometers from the border. And we are also locking up and slowly realizing that life from this day will not be the same. 101 days since that black day. Over 1,200 people were brutally murdered. Children and adults were burned alive. Their bodies were mutilated. Women and men were raped under torture and in front of their relatives. 3 months we are at war against a cruel and inhuman terrorist organization. 240 men and women were kidnapped. There are still 136 hostages who are in captivity in underground tunnels, wounded, raped, starving, freezing cold. Since then, we have all been kidnapped. We are all hostages. 125,000 Israelis are displaced from their homes. Dozens of communities of kibbutzim and villages still cannot return to their homes. Dozens of soldiers have been killed and wounded in battles. The war takes a terrible cost on civilians on both sides of the border. The international community is partly silent, partly boycotting, partly disbelieving, partly judging Israel. Some do not even condemn Hamas. Some even go as far as calling for the elimination of Israel. Some of the international community supports Israel and helps it protect itself. Since October 7th, we are not really breathing, not really sleeping, not really living. Alongside this, people and communities are revealing in their full strength in the face of the deep loss, the fracture, the destruction, the worry, the resilience that emerge is great. Especially, this is the hour of the community, the hour of the civilian organizations of community work. And amidst all the chaos and struggle, the power of the intentional communities, the small communities that have a cooperative basis, is especially noticeable. Communities with a strong internal organization, leadership, ethos, and community culture. Communities that are based on mutual human connections, intergenerational communities rooted in their land. Communities that know how to hold a dialogue and make joint decisions. We will shed light on these communities at this session. Although we are struggling to find the words to describe the horrors of October 7th, to explain the intensity of emotions, today we will try to give words and concepts. This session is taking place while we are still at war. The communities we will talk about have not returned home, nor it is clear in which way this will happen and when. We will hear 3 speakers who will present their perspective from their experience during this period. At the end of the 3rd lecture, it will be possible to ask questions. I invite Yaniv Hegyi, Kibbutz Be'eri, former community director, head of Communal headquarters in the Kibbutz movement, founder of 710 Memorial ORG, and survivor of the October massacre. Yaniv.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to ICSA. So my name is Yaniv, and I live in Kibbutz Be'eri. Kibbutz Be'eri is a small communal kibbutz near the border of Gaza. We are old school kibbutz, a communal kibbutz. That means that we share almost everything. Our salaries shared, our houses are shared, our cars are shared. Almost everything. Only my underwear is not shared. And so it's a very communal kibbutz, and we live in a very, very small and strong community. We are about 550 members, kibbutz members, grown-ups, and about 1,200 people, including children and guests that live in the kibbutz. That was the number before October 7th. And after October 7th, we are about 450 kibbutz members. More than 90 people from the kibbutz were murdered. More than 20 were kidnapped to Gaza. Women, children, grown-ups. Every 1 out of 10 kibbutz member is either killed or kidnapped. So that means that in a very, very small and communal community, we got a very, very big hit. Each and every one of the community has family or friends or good friends or people from work that are kidnapped or killed. So all the community got hit very, very strongly. And we got hit with the community, with our families, and each and every one of us. And today I want to talk about the community and how to see it from a community perspective. I would say that Kibbutz Be'eri was very left-wing kibbutz. We believed in peace. We believed in good intentions of people from the other side, that there might be peace, there might be some way to bridge our conflict. Each year, we had a rally in the kibbutz where kibbutz members and also the kibbutz gave money to the people of Gaza in order for them to live peacefully and dignity. We had people from the kibbutz that were volunteering in receiving patients from Gaza, receiving them at the border and bringing them to hospitals inside Israel to get medical care and bring them back to Gaza. And I would say that also something that was broke, that the biggest people that believed in peace in Be'eri were murdered. And that changed our perspective and my perspective to the conflict. And so one of the things that broke was also my thought about humanity and the future of the region. Talking about a community and how community helped me and helped us during this very hard period of time, I would start in October 7th, where me, my wife, and my small kid were in the safe room inside our house, and we got a lot of bombs and rockets, and we got messages through our cell phone saying that the terrorists are inside the kibbutz. And then we heard them talking and shouting Arabic. We heard them shooting. We heard doors slamming. We just heard them coming. And through the and I would say that that was the first time that I felt the community, where people inside the community messaged and text each other through the WhatsApp messages. We texted each other what's going on, and people informed other people where are the terrorists, what are they doing. For example, my father-in-law, he says, look, I hear them outside my house. I hear them inside my house. They are trying to open the door. They are burning us. Luckily, he's alive now, but many are not. And so first, we use the community to share what's going on. So we had groups of WhatsApp text messages that we had WhatsApp messages of families inside the kibbutz, WhatsApp messages of our region in the kibbutz, like the few houses that we are surrounded with. We had messages of everybody in the kibbutz, and we had friends. So we talked to each other a lot of the time, and this talking helped us a lot because, for example, I live in a second-story house, and I could see what's going outside outside my house. So I pictured, for example, when the house of my neighbors they burned it. So I pictured the picture of the house, and I said it to all the neighbors, look, your house is burning. And then I could see if the terrorists are outside of the house or not, in order for these neighbors to run out of their house before it's burned and to move to another house. This is, for example, one thing that the community helped. Another thing that the community helped is when another neighbor, which is a mother with 3 little kids, she understood through the messages that I can see. She said, "Look, the room is getting really, really hot from the fire. I want to run to your safe room." So I said, "Of course, come to my safe room." And then what happened was that I moved out of the safe room, and I waited for her in the staircase next to my house, and she ran with her 3 small children. She ran about 100 meters to my house, and then at the end, the terrorists started shooting at her, but she managed to reach to our house, and we closed the door, and we got into the safe room, and then my small kid helped this mother get her breath back, and they played with the kids. So we helped each other. And since that day, this family calls my small kid our angel, because he helped them. So we see that on that day, we helped a lot one another. Also, I can see that we have, on that day, we have about 12 people in the kibbutz, that they are the emergency squad. They have guns in their house, they have rifles. And immediately when this event started, they went out to protect their house. And then you can see the difference between soldiers and the first response group. The soldiers that arrived, they were very equipped, they were professionals. But the people that defended our community, they are not so well trained and they are not so well armed, but they had the highest motivation because they defended their family and they defended their community. So they did everything in their power in order to defend the community. So also this is one example of a community that is under stress. Immediately we help one another and we defend one another, and we are willing to sacrifice our lives to be with one another. And this is just an example from this day of the event itself. But this help moves on, and I can see advantages of community also after the event. For example, we were at 2 buses that we were evacuated in the middle of the night, and for 2 buses that I was in one of the buses, there was no place in the place where we evacuated to. So they said to us, okay, go on and search for another place. We reached En-Gedi, which is a kibbutz, also a kibbutz in the Dead Sea, which is a peaceful place. And then once we arrived, we saw how a community can receive another community. And Michal, another spokesman that will speak in a few minutes, will also talk about it. So when we as a community, these 2 buses, reached another community, immediately the community started talking and helping each other. And this is very, very important because it brings back our faith in human beings, in humanity, in the fact that people will help us. And I can see another example that in the days after the event, it was like a very it was a big mess. We didn't know exactly who is where. We didn't know exactly who got hurt, who is missing, who is dead, who is kidnapped. And we're talking about our best friends and about our families. Like there was a lot of uncertainty. And each evening, I got the names of the people that for sure they are murdered. And I needed to, as a leader of my community, I needed to send a message to the people. And there was a discussion between the leaders how to do that. Because most of the time when someone dies in the kibbutz, so we immediately send the text message for all the kibbutz members in the group of the kibbutz that this person passed away. But it was clear to me that this is not the case now, because the people are in such a stress, and we need each other in order to get these messages. So what we did was that I gathered everybody. We were outside in the grass and under a tree, and we holded hands. So we sit in the circle, holding hands. Each one holds hands to another person, and then I read the names each evening, one after the other. And each name, we closed our eyes and we sent energy, good energy, to the people that passed away, that were murdered, and to their families. And we received it as a group. We received it as a community. And each name that I called, I felt in my hands the response. It's like a tennis net that receives a rocket ball, and then the net like moves like backwards, and then gets to the initial to the beginning. I felt each name, what it does to the community members, and it was very, very noticeable how important it is not to be each person by himself, but to receive it as a community. There's a lot of strength in that. And I could see it, especially when one night we missed a name. And we after this, all the list of the names, after we talked about it, we also sent it by the WhatsApp. And in the WhatsApp, there was one name that we didn't list in our meeting. And I saw how people reacted to this name, and they came to me and they said, look, make sure that you're not making any mistakes, that all the names, we receive it together, because we cannot handle receiving such a name and such news by ourselves. And then I understood again how important it is to stick together and to be together in this traumatic event. So these are all kinds of examples, but I would say also that the community is not only a source of strength; it's also a source of it has its problems. And you're from the ICSA, you know this thing, because, for example, when we talk about a community, so the leaders of the community need to make decisions. And most of the times, the decisions are according to the benefit and to the welfare of all the community. But in a status of trauma and of stress and times of war, people have different needs. Some people need to be close to the community, and some people need to be far away from the community because they cannot talk to anybody. Some people, they have to work and they have to do stuff. And other people, they don't want to work, they don't do anything, they are inside their misery and they need the time to heal themselves by themselves. So each person have different needs, and for a community, it's very, very problematic to give the freedom to each and every one to do whatever it needs, because the community have rules, and we have our normas, and we have our values, and so it brings conflicts. And when there are conflicts inside the community at the time of war, and people are in trauma, so they might, people in trauma, they cannot understand complexity. People in trauma, the response of our body is to fight or flight, is to think black and white, to think whether the community is good for us or it's bad to us, friends or enemies. And it's very, very hard to lead people in a state of this trauma. So what I think that the biggest challenge of the community leaders is not to work black and white, to lead to a certain place, to think very like 1 or 0, but to work with complexity, to work with flexibility, to think about creative ideas. This is the way to do it. But it's very, very hard to think creatively and to think very openly and flexibility when you are in time of war and people are dying and people are kidnapped and you don't know where your good friends are and you're not sure whether you will go back to the kibbutz or you'll not go back to the kibbutz. We don't have a house to go back to because the kibbutz is burned. We don't know when can we go back, and if we go back, we don't know what will be the situation with Gaza. We understand that the Gaza people will stay in Gaza, and we understand also that they will never, never, never give up until we will be dead. So people think, what am I doing? Why am I going back to live next to the border when I know that the people at the other side of the border will keep on doing war and war and war until the end of times? So do I wish for my grandchildren that are not born yet to pass through what my children passed through? This is the future that I hope for? So these are very, very, very big questions, and each and every one of the families need to answer these questions by themselves. And when it comes to the community-wise, so the community needs to make decisions of the community. For the community leaders, it's obvious that we go back to the kibbutz, that we will rebuild what was burned, that we will stand in our grounds. We are sure that the community leaders, they lead to one direction, but sometimes some families, they go to another direction. And when and sometimes there is conflict. And when there is conflict in these times of trauma, it can be problematic as well. So if I conclude everything that I said until now, I would say that in these times of war, the community is one of the biggest sources of strength that I felt during these 3 months. But at the same time, it brings a lot of conflicts and a lot of problematic as well. And to lead a community in this time of war, it's something amazing. It's something really hard. It's much harder than to lead a community in times of peace. And I will have to have like 1 or 2 questions because I will not stay until the end of the session. So if you have some questions, I will be happy to answer.
Can I ask? Is there no one
Yes,
else?
of course.
Yeah. First of all, we're neighbors. I live in Shuva, next across the road, and Be'eri is where I fix my mountain bikes. I've been there many times. Very good friends. My community specifically was not infiltrated. The terrorists were stopped about half an hour before they got to us. And my question is, how do you view the network of communities? So both, your community is part of a network of the kibbutz movement, and there are many other kibbutzim that support you, and also locally. In what ways, Shuva, Zimrat, Kfar Mamon, I'm saying names of villages that are next to Yaniv's community. In what ways the local communities that have not been or have been less, we've all been impacted, but less impacted, can be helpful or supportive? How do you see the network and not just the individual community function in this?
Okay, thank you. So I see it in 2 ways. First, I think that the first communities that helped us are communities that are far away from the event. Okay, so Michal will talk about Mishmar Haemek, and you will see how Mishmar Haemek, that is at the center of Israel, helped kibbutzim. I was evacuated to Hegyi. So communities that are healthy, that are not affected directly from the event, they were the biggest source of help for the communities that they were evacuated. Not our immediate neighbors. But having said that, I think that there are things that we do together. For example, we have a forum of kibbutzim and the yeshuvim and settlements that sit together and coordinate what are our needs from the government, from the local council, from people that would like to help. And we try to coordinate our needs so we will not be competitors, but we will help each other. So there is cooperation, but our biggest help is from other communities that are healthy. One more question. Okay. So Orna, I pass it back to you, please.
Yaniv,
Yes, Michal.
can you hear me? Well, if we would meet like last week in Be'eri, I will hug you after listening to your story. And this is touching. When I was walking in Be'eri, I was crying for the first hour. I couldn't stop crying. We went there between the houses that were burned, that were destroyed. We saw names of people that were killed or kidnapped. And after an hour, I found that I stopped crying. And I remember what Hannah Arendt wrote about the banality of evil. And I was thinking about the banality of pain. After this trauma, I think that we heard so many horrible stories that sometimes we become banal regarding the pain. And this is one challenge of a hosting community to cope with this kind of the banality of evil. So I just wanted to reflect on what I saw in Be'eri.
Thank you very much. I do feel that sometimes we are flooded with pain, we are flooded with stories that are horrible, And so it makes me, let's say, numb to the situation. And then I go to sleep at night, I get up in the morning fresh, and then I get this wave again. So each and every one of these mornings, I say to my friends that in the morning, it's the most hardest times in the day. Thank you, Michal.
Right. Thank
Is
you
there
very much.
another question?
I think we need to move on. We have
Yes.
just under an hour left, and we still have two more speakers. And if we could keep the last 10 minutes for any comments or questions, that would be quite good. We do have to finish exactly at 12, at least my time. So, Michal, would you like to?
אורנה, את לא רוצה להציג?
Orna is the moderator, so she will do it.
Can you hear me?
I will introduce you, okay? One moment, okay? So Michal, she is a professor at the School of Social Work in the University of Haifa. Her research area is our family and family therapy, collective and national trauma, and families in poverty. In addition, she has an extensive experience in couple and family therapy and in the supervision of social workers who respond to direct and indirect victims of terror attack and population living under security threats. Currently, Michal is the community director of Kibbutz Mishmar Haemek, that hosts the members of Kibbutz Nachal Oz, located on the border of Gaza. And Michal will talk about coping alone and together with a collective trauma, the story of the traumatized and hosting communities.
Let me start the story with a description of how it all began. It started on Saturday, October 7th morning. On 8:15, my phone rang. I just woke up and found out that the call was from my colleague with whom I shared the role of community director. After working for 3 years together, I knew that usually on Saturdays she sleeps until 10-11. So I answered and asked her who died. This is the only reason I could think about regarding the early phone call. The answer I got was shocking. Open the TV. Hamas entered too many kibbutzim on around the Gaza border. I didn't turn on my TV, but called to the chairperson of the emergency committee of Mishmar Haemek and asked him to convene the committee as soon as possible. At 10 o'clock, the committee met. It seems that all of us function like robots, like numbs. We knew what to do, so the kibbutz will be protected and ready for possible missile attack by the Hezbollah or a terror attack by one of the terror organizations locating in Jenin, a city in the north of the West Bank, relatively close to our kibbutz. All the preparation was completed within an hour, including transmission of the relevant information to all members of the kibbutz. In addition, we started to prepare for the hosting of Kibbutz Nachal Oz. For those of you who doesn't know, several years ago, the kibbutz movement took upon itself the care to the kibbutzim located in the border of Gaza and Lebanon and link them with kibbutzim located in greater distance from the border. The goal was to allow the kibbutzim located near the border to evacuate their population during periods of intensive missile and rocket attacks or during army operations. The members of Nachal Oz were hosted by Mishmar Haemek 3 times before the current hosting. However, in the previous time, they came, first of all, many of the kibbutz members didn't come and didn't leave the kibbutz. Usually, They came with all the necessary equipment for a stay of several days, including down sheets, towels, clothes, etc. As we already understood in the first hour, in this time, it will be different. We immediately started preparing for their reception, cleaning the room at the local morning. Sorry, I'm sick. Making the beds, preparing towels, opening the department store to buy brushes and toothpaste, soaps, diaper, baby food, and more. At 10 at night, we were informed that they might arrive around midnight or later. So we understood that they might be hungry and started to prepare food and arrange the dining hall for a meal. The first bus arrived around 6 o'clock on October 8th. What was shocking for me was the quietness. More than 50 people came out of the bus, babies, young children, teenagers, adults, and older people, and it was so quiet, so different from regular Israeli population. I looked at the people and saw what I named as empty eyes. I couldn't understand whether it was tiredness, fear, anxiety, sadness, uncertainty, or maybe all of it together. Some people were barefoot, some with clothes with which they ran from their beds to the shelters. They were refugees, like those I have seen many times in the TV and in pictures, but this time it was different. It was real. It was in my kibbutz. It was in Israel. After an hour, I saw them sitting in groups of 2, 3, or 4 people talking. They told each other about their experiences during the horrible day. They asked the people that were missing. They already knew about some of the members that was murdered or kidnapped, and still there were some people missing. They hugged each other. I saw many hugs. At this moment, I know that they would overcome the trauma. I didn't know how much time it will take. I didn't know how they will do it. But I knew one thing, they have a social support. Social support is considered as one of the most significant variables helping to cope with trauma. Another variable is the ability to ask for help and support, and the member of Nahal Oz ask for it, for themselves as individuals, families, and the entire community. They were not afraid or ashamed to talk about the horror they experienced during October 7th. As one of their members told me, the shame died at that day. In the first 6 weeks, the community of Nahal Oz could be defined as victim, and the community of Mishmar Haemek as a savior. The contradiction between the two roles, that of the victim and that of the savior, can be a basis for misuse of power by the victim and the savior community. Foucault, the French philosopher, claimed that power exists in every type of human relationship. According to his claim, power in itself is not a problem. It becomes a problem when there is an unjust distribution of it. For example, one side gets all or most of the power for all or most of the time. In such situation, the partner, individual, group, or community who hold most of the power may use it unfairly or even aggressively. The party that has no power at all or has little power will tend to develop low self-esteem image that may affect his entire existence. including challenging situations such as individual or collective trauma. Furthermore, when referring to trauma or to collective trauma, the impact of being a victim and or in a dependent position like a guest may project on the future narrative of the individual and or the community. However, it is much more complicated because coping with trauma requires time for mourning, for being with the pain and the loss, and readiness to receive help. Being open to receive help, often connected with previous self-esteem and strength, either of the individual and or of the community. Nahal Oz had these strengths. They led the member of Mishmar Haemek to organize and activate all the systems that provide basic needs, such as dining hall, laundry, etc. They let us reorganize their educational system to provide psychological first aid and to help them open their accounting office and more. Although the first week, almost all these services were activated by members of Mishmar Haemek, all this was done after receiving the approval of the management of Nahal Oz. The challenge for Mishmar Haemek was also complicated. We had to be aware and sensitive to the recovery of Nahal Oz and to recognize their capability of operating their services on their own. What it meant was to transfer responsibility to Nahal Oz and help them to take it. Furthermore, to understand, accept, and contain that their way of managing these services is sometimes different of our way. In Foucault terms, it means to give up some of the power of the hosting community. I appreciated the ability of Nahal Oz to return relatively shortly after a very short time, to almost full community functioning. Let me describe the process of recovery according to my definition of collective and national trauma. Collective and national trauma is developed through a process that begins with catastrophic event, such as a disaster or mass trauma, that causes loss, physical and psychological damage and pain, which have impact on the entire group and on the individuals within this group. The impact creates emotional and psychological wounds that become the keystones in the group narrative, set of belief, identity, and it passes across generations. The national collective trauma is socially constructed process and has an impact not only on the past, but on the future identity. So it was the goal of the hosting community to help Nahal Oz to construct their narrative in a way that highlight, besides the horror and the loss of members, their strengths to cope and with the catastrophe. They are just in the beginning of coping. And I hope they will construct a community narrative that include, along with the pain and loss, a significant part that focusing on her strengths on the October 7th and after it. And to the narrative of Mishmar Haemek. On April 1948, our kibbutz was attacked by the Arab led by Kaugji, and all of the children of the kibbutz, their teachers and caregivers, were evacuated to 3 kibbutzim on the other side of the Jezreel Valley, Merchavia, Mizra, and Sarid. These children, who are in today in their late 80s, remember being refugees. For them and for us as a community, it is an opportunity to thank these kibbutzim through the hosting of another kibbutz, Nachal Oz. It's an indirect thank. 2 years, when we celebrate, someone asked me 2 days ago how this hosting process will affect Mishmar Haemek along the history. And this is what I answered him. 2 years ago, when we celebrated 100 years for the establishment of Mishmar Haemek, we put up a musical about the Battle of Mishmar Haemek. This coming weekend, we are going to celebrate 102 years to the establishment of Mishmar Haemek. As a community director, I have to write something to the kibbutz, and in my blessing, I wrote that I wish that in 5, 10, 20, or 50 years, doesn't have to be 100 years, we will put a musical regarding the hosting of Nachal Oz during this difficult time to our country. Will this be the story of our kibbutz? I don't know, but let me hope that this will be. I didn't enter to describe all the detail in the process of hosting, all the kibbutz assembly where we decided to give them place for a year, and then on the other assembly when we decided that we are going to let them a place to build, the state will build the caravilla, I don't know how to say it in English, and what it meant that they might stay in Mishmar Haemek more than a year. What I want to say that there were people, it was a minority, a very small minority, that didn't want it to be, but the large minority of the kibbutz supported, and for me, it was one of the greatest days in my role as a community director. And I must say that the last few months is the most meaningful and significant time for me as a community director. The hosting and being able to put in practice all our values of Zionism, a responsibility for others, and just being human. Thank you.
Thank you, Michal. You connect the theory to reality, and it was very inspiring. And your lecture teaches us a lot about solidarity and how communities can help each other. We will give time to questions after we will hear Dr. Sara Shadmi. I want to invite our last speaker, Dr. Sara Shadmi, founder and CEO of Varda Institute for Community Building. She's leading strategic planning to create strong resilience communities in Israel and worldwide. Sara is an expert in community work to develop a new way to strengthen community, which is called culture of belonging, through community building based on her former experience in building a new kibbutz in Israel, leading the young kibbutzim movement and intentional communities for young adults in Israel and around the world. Since the October War started, the Varda Institute center all the work from the world back to Israel and develop a model of community in time of crisis. Sara will talk about community in time of crisis.
Thank you. I want to thank Paz for helping me with the slideshow. But Paz, you can show me and then we can go to that. So at least I can see you face to face, all of you. You can see me all in this way. Okay. So I want to start and say that the last 3 months were in Israel a hell, as we heard, and especially the collapsing of the basic assumption that brought the establishment of the State of Israel, the deep, deep belief that being an independent country, sovereign to ourselves, it will never happen again. It will never happen again. The Jews will be actually massacred on their land. And it actually happened. The nightmare actually happened. Israeli citizens, Arabs and Jews were actually massacred, kidnapped, as we heard. The terrible attack and the war that just happened hurt especially these intentional communities, kibbutzim, and other community frameworks near the border of the south of Israel. That's why understanding the framework of intentional community and community on its weakness and its challenges and its strength as a way to recover and to build yourself as a beginning is a crucial challenge that we have. And the framework of community and community building become really crucial. What I'll try to do now, based on the experience we had around the world with earthquake in Nepal, other disaster, but especially what happened in Israel since October 7, and the fact as we were presented helping and working with the hostages, families, the national headquarters of the hostages, evacuated communities in the south, in the north, and other communities around the country. What I try to do now in the few minutes I have is to give a theoretical and a practical framework, because this extreme situation can be a very important infrastructure for all communities around the world, especially intentional communities, but other communities also, to learn from this Israeli devastated experience and to use it as an infrastructure for other communities to be stronger and to be able to cope with crisis times. Never mind so much which kind of crisis, because this situation was really, really extreme. So I want to start for identifying what's typical to this time of crisis. And I want to, and Paz, you can go to the next slide. And I want to show it through few elements that characterize these times of crisis. First of all, it's a breakdown of all dimensions of routine. You can think about it in the individual level, but also on the collective level. And this breakdown of the routine life, the daily life, comes with a huge feeling of uncertainty and supported by a lot of fear, because the nightmare really happened. The most terrified dreams, nightmares that we had actually happened. So all of these breakdowns, together with fear and uncertainty, brought to the individual and to the community feeling of embarrassment, sometimes not knowing even what is the right thing to do. Put on it, adding to that, the personal stress that a person has and a community has, the conflict, expectation between personal needs and being able to function and the expectation from the outside. It could be to the leaders of the community, it could be on the personal and family levels. These aspects, when we try to build this model for community in war, community in crisis, we realize, and we can go to the next session, is to see how it's a movement. To the next slide, Paz. We can see a movement between adjustment, emergency demand, swift adjustments, and adaptation to extreme circumstances. But on the other hand, conservation, what we know, that crisis time actually in many dimensions, existing communities strengthen and weaknesses are magnified. It doesn't invent anything else, it's just emphasized. And we can see it in 3 levels of the community. Let's go to the next slide, Paz, thank you. We can see it on the community leadership. Sometimes we saw it and we know it, that the formal community leadership is not always adjusted to the new situation. For example, when we saw and we worked with these evacuated community, the first week of the war, almost immediately after it happened, some of the members of these communities in the hotel said, you know, our leaders are from the outside, they're hired leadership, foreign leadership, but now we understand we need our because our inner leaders understand much better. And what we can see in other places, that a new kind of leadership, a waking up. So maybe it means that during these times, we need to shift and to widen the perception of leadership and who can function during these times. Another dimension of the communities that we could see during this time of crisis is what happening to being with other person. And our two witnesses gave amazing example for that. On one hand, I just went as a family, as a community through terrible moments, and I want to be with myself, linking my wounds, need to be inside with ourselves. On another hand, a big need and a desire to be with other people who went exactly with things that I went through. So these movements, these two extremes, you can see it all over. The other part is the human capital. Again, people who found themselves freeze, not knowing what's the right thing to do, and other people who found themselves the most effective, especially in these kinds of times. So let's go to the next slide. So our basic assumption, and I will go more details and example to that when we'll go ahead, but I just want to put the 4 assumptions that we worked with, and we are working still, and we are offering it to communities in crisis. First of all, is creating an emergency routine, which sounds completely paradoxically. Emergency and routine, what does it mean? As an anchor that provides sense of security. I'll emphasize that in a few minutes. Another assumption is that the community's strength, the community has much more power than the collective of the individuals. The community's strength enables individuals to cope in restoration and recovery, because and we saw it, how it actually reminds people, oh, I'm part of this strong community. It says something about my strength. Another thing is what we call the circle of strength, because between the community and its individuals, its members. By strengthening the collective, I'm volunteering, I'm doing things, the community looks and says, wow, look what empower and strong members we have. And that empower, again, the collective, and the collective, the individuals. And the last assumption is the transition. You know, in Israel, we have a theory that talks about resilience community, and it says, what does it mean? The measurements of a resilient community is that during routine time, daily times, you try to prepare yourself to the crisis time. And I want to offer you almost an alternative, or an addition to that, is how actually to take these things that happen during this crisis and to bring it to our daily, back to our new future, becoming even a stronger community. All of it in order to do, let's go to the next slide. The purpose of all the purposes, the goal is actually the leverage, the strength, and the capabilities of the community to maximize and revitalize its potential for the well-being of its members. And let's go to the other one. And to emerge from these times, think how ambitious and how powerful it could be from these times, an even stronger community than we were before the crisis. So what I want to do now is to take these assumptions and to give you some principles, actions that we actually use, and we offer it to different communities all over the world now in time of crisis. So let's go to the next slide. So I want to relate now to some principles for actually a very practical one to work with during these times. So the first one is to pay attention where exactly the stage of the community during this process. And we are making differentiation between 3 stages. The emergency phase, which is the chaotic one. The people are on the edge as a community, as individuals, and they need solutions. We'll talk about giving solution in a minute. What does it mean and what does it do? The second stage, which you can't be in this hectic situation for too long. It could be a week, a month, but understanding that this situation is going to be our routine in the coming months. So you have to create an emergency routine phase. It means, and we'll see it in a minute, how to do it, to transition to routine that are adapted to this way in these days of crisis. And the third one is all the time during the crisis, and especially the leaders and the people, the experts that are working, to think about how everything we're doing now will affect, as beautifully Michal Shamai said it as an example regarding the narrative, how it can help us in going back to the next future, the new future we want to create. So one of the most powerful part that we have to pay attention is that when we are in emergency times, our tendency is to give services as quickly as possible, as effective as possible. But think about it. Giving services is asking people, what do you need, right? What do you need is to deal with what you don't have. And you really don't have a lot of things during this time. But resilience won't come from giving answers just to what you don't have. Resilience is to connect yourself to your strength as a community and as individuals, to remind yourself how powerful you are, how much strength you are. So one of the things we saw when the evacuated communities went to the hotels and had to leave their houses was, and by the way, we saw it all over Israel, is that instead of going to the expert of the first emergency stage, when you create these routines, we saw how the local human capital was so powerful. For example, one of the understanding of the kibbutzim, evacuated kibbutzim, was that instead of bringing these experts in the first stage, maybe the women who were the educator for early childhood can actually help these young children from their kibbutz that they know already, and be such a huge support, not just for themselves, but for the kids themselves. So moving from giving services to being community builder is to move or widen the spectrum from giving needs and work with what giving services to needs to actually work with the strengths. Another important is what is written here. One of our tendency during emergency is to split the people between people who need help and people who can help us and the needers. And one of the deeper understanding that we have that, again, resilience won't come with just being a needed. So we want to offer people not to relate to that as two different groups, but to relate to that as two different situations. And community can allow people to move from one situation to another situation. For example, in one of the communities, a woman that her husband was 50 days in the army and is still there in the preserved army fighting in Gaza, has 7 children around her, taking care of them, felt so helpless at the end. She couldn't bear it anymore. So the community was there to help her. But in that moment, she could help other people. She was an educator. So helping her kids enable her to feel that she's not supported, but she's also supporting. And she gave a lot of advices how to use this situation in order to help other people and the educational system of her community. The next active principle is, again, when we try to be very effective and to give solutions to needed group in the community, the mothers, the children, the elderly, we have to pay attention very, very specifically to the uniqueness of every person and every subgroup in it. And one of the communities told us a story that they prepared food, the same food for everybody of these families their husbands are in the reserve, and they realized that one of these families, that's not what her need. Her need was completely that people will come and talk with her and not just supplying her food. So paying attention to the uniqueness of the need and the uniqueness of the strength of the people is a crucial thing for the future resilience for the communities themselves. The next practical one is actually using, again, what we saw many times that during emergency, we tend to say, okay, everything we knew until now is not relevant. Let's organize ourselves for the new situation. And many times we know that if we want to strengthen the community, and the examples that Yaniv and Michal gave were so beautiful, how you actually take the framework the community had in their life before the disaster, and how not to change or leave them aside, but to adapt them the thing that we are based on routines that we had before, but we adjusted them, gives a feeling that the community exists. Because think about it, what does it mean the community continues? It means the networking, the feeling, the routines, the practices we have as a community. That's the meaning that we are exist as a community. The next practical is maybe a very powerful one, is that, again, the tendency was at the beginning to shut down yourself, not to see it was even risky to see each other. But I want to take it, so we urge and we help the community think how to do it as much as possible face to face and to give this sense of security. But this war took us much more extreme than we ever thought, because actually, in the first time, the communities has to function as community when many of them weren't together. They were split all over the country. They are still split all over the country. So how do you keep home far away from home? How do you keep a physical, geographical community who lost its geographical home? How you create a sense of belonging to the community and keeping this framework, although you are far away from the geographic and you are all scattered all over. So the idea was, again, to keep and to make alive the perception of the community as a perception, as a awareness to that through systems, to, for example, to create, and we did it with some of the community, to create a sub-leadership in each one of these concentration camp that they were organized in. And even if people were individually went to their family houses all over the country, how there are routines that we are making sure, how they have roles during the internet and during the Zoom, that they are continuing with their responsibility even though they are far away, and even how you create ceremonies that are not face-to-face, but you keep what we say emergency routine. Take your basic daily routine that you had as a community, framework, ceremonies, tradition, and adjust them to that stage. And another one, I think we're almost at the end. Let's go to the next slide. Is actually, I think Michal spoke about it so beautifully. The most important assets that the community has is its collective identity. Who are we? What is so unique about us? What's typical and unify us? What is us as a community? Who are we? So part of what, and again, Michal gave beautiful example of how actually in these days, the narrative, this powerful story, who we are, it's actually crafting a vision and adaptive a narrative of hope during what happened. And I want to tell a story about one of the communities that was evacuated and was the most hurted from all the communities. They lost almost more than a third of their members. What happened to them? That in the first time, they called and said, listen, terrible things are happening here. And the community actually lost its ability to believe. They felt so guilty that they actually neglected their friends. So what actually happened that the children, adult, the people who grew in the kibbutz and left it, organized themselves and started to actually help the kibbutz that was evacuated. And these children left, these adults who were born there, left the kibbutz far away before, many years before, but still now, and we know that one of the pride of a community, it's next generation. And the fact that the next generation organized themselves and have this community to overcome and organize themselves was a huge pride and actually changed the narrative during these days about who we are. The next and the last thing I want to show is that we define the 10 commandments, the 10 principles to build community in difficult times, just to-do list that we can offer to people all over the world, and actually we used it already. And the last thing I want to say is to give something to hope for the future. And I want to summarize my things. Can we go to the next slide, please? I want to summarize it with words that give, at least for me, gave a lot of hope. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for bringing the practice of community building in time of crisis. I think that your energy and your professional expertise really teaches us how to believe in the power of community. So thank you about this. And I want to thank Yaniv. He's not here, but I want to thank him for sharing with us his personal story and his community story. And this story, I think, shed light about also the power of community, of intentional community. And it also shed light about what happened in the 7th of October in Kibbutz Be'eri, and how brave were the members of Kibbutz Be'eri and the children of Kibbutz Be'eri. And I also want to thank Michal for teaching us about collective trauma, about solidarity between community, and about the importance of building narratives for building resilience and community agency. We finished listening to these 3 lectures that no one could have predicted that someone would write them. We are used to a discourse in the intentional communities about peacemaking, about inclusion, about humanist values. We are not used to a discourse about them in the context of terrorism, displacement, loss, and trauma. Each of the lectures pointed to a unique power of the idea and the structure of intentional communities. From this common concern of all of us, I want to open it to questions, and the floor is yours. You can ask and you can share your ideas about these lectures. We have 15 minutes.
I want to add that you could put the questions on the chat if you want, and we will monitor that if that's better for you. Or you can just unmute yourself and ask, or you can raise your hand like this.
Okay, I would like to ask from the field, both to Sara and Michal. So you gave us a lot of theory. In practice, we know that some communities get more mentoring and more support than others. Can we, after 100 days, can we somehow measure the difference in impact, or like, we can say, okay, communities got X amount of hours of support and mentoring and guidance are functioning on those parameters better, and those who didn't, like, do we have some evidence from the field on the impact and the efficiency of the different tools that we are trying to implement?
Michal, you want to? I'm ready to answer. Michal, you want to answer?
You're
Now
on
we
mute,
can
Michal.
hear you. We can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can.
I don't think I can answer your question because I know one community and they are here, and I didn't measure the effectiveness of our hosting and of our help so I cannot compare it to other communities who are in other places. But what I hear, and we hear a lot of stories, that for communities who locate in hotels, it's much more difficult than communities that are living within another community, and the relationship between the hosting community, which usually didn't have all this traumatic experience like the victimized community, it's some kind of healing meeting, healing interaction. And this is the only thing I can say. For example, for Nahal Oz, the state gave them the opportunity to live in Kfar Maccabiah, which is close to the center of the country in Tel Aviv. And it's also like a rural area because they have grass and houses, and they decided to remain in Mishmar Haemek. So at the beginning, I was thinking that this decision was accepted by them through the heart and not through the head. It wasn't illogical because in the hotels they had more rooms, so they can divide, each family will get 2 rooms, and it's close to Tel Aviv, there were schools. And then I was talking with the community worker that helped them to create the future, and she told me, no, they have very logic thing. They say for staying in Mishmar Haemek, they wanted to be independent. And if they will live in hotel like Kfar Maccabiah, someone will come to clean their room. Someone will make their laundry. They won't be able to walk in the dining hall and prepare their food. They won't be able to cook in their home. They don't want to transfer the children from one place to another. And then she said another thing, that some people said that the political context in Mishmar Haemek is much more closer than the political context they will meet in Kfar Maccabiah and all the cities around them. And one other woman told me, we came here from Nahal Oz after a horrible day, and you were the first one to hug us. And this is part of accepting a decision from their heart, but maybe we cannot differentiate in this situation between the heart and the head, between logic and emotional. And this is what I can answer you. I don't know what really works in the hosting beside the things that we are doing here.
Thank you, Michal. Sarale?
And I wanted to add to that in addition to the physical best framework to accept this, to arrange this process of healing, I want to stress something I said in my things, that communities that were, and again, I think, Michal, what you talked about, Kfar Aza is a great example for that. Nahal Oz, slicha. You see, I'm thinking about Nir Oz, Nahal Oz, Kfar Oz. Okay, so Nahal Oz. That what we heard about, the community has to be strong enough to dare to agree to look at its challenges and in its weaknesses. For example, one of the communities, again, I don't want to say names, it's like, right, it's like we want to protect them, but community that were very formal before and very service-oriented, were running immediately to giving solutions and services, and were very difficult to cope with the emotional and the relationship and the crisis that actually made even worse things that happened in the community before. Like some families that felt that they felt on the margin of the community before, was afraid to be with all the community when they were evacuated. It was even worse before it happened. So I think if I want to answer what you asked, Ariel, again, it has to be very, very adaptive to where the community is. And the most important thing, its relation to its personal collective identity. If they were very proud of it, sometimes it was also a problem, not just an assets. And on the contrary, when they felt very weak and felt helplessness, the way to help them was completely different. For example, should we put experts there or put in the front people from the community? It's completely tactic, depends on the relationship that the community has to itself. It's personal, it's a collective personal assessment who they are, and you have to adjust it. So I think the best way to recover is to combine between inner forces and our outside forces, because what you see from outside you can see from inside, and it's an advantage and a disadvantage for both sides. So combining these two parts can actually help be able to take the quality of each one of these situations, be a stranger to the community and dare to give things that the inner one won't be able, and to be from the inner part and knowing the sensitivities and everywhere how to do that. So I think that this combination, not if to give help, not how much help, but the way to give help is the most crucial one.
Thank you, Sara. Jan, you want to ask something?
Yes, I wanted to say that I was so impressed by this structure of this session that we looked at the events, actually what happened, described personally, and then we looked at the hosting of the refugees from that event. And then we finished off with what are our takeaways? What have we learned from this? And my question is there any idea that this might be published? Because I think this is an amazing story of community resilience. And there's a lot to be learned from it, from other people, for other people. So that's my question is there any chance of having a publication based on this?
I can say again that I know that in Israel there is a huge process now of testimonial, keeping the testimonial and writing the testimonials. I think what you offer now is a great offering. I will be happy to take part in this way. I can say about the Varda Institute that all the materials I talked about are published in our website, and you can use it and take it all over the world as much as you need it. I hope it will make good. And again, the connection between the stories and the conceptualizing and the practical aspect, making it more generic for every community around the world, can be a good challenge to do it, and I'm ready to take part of it. Thank you, Yana, for the idea.
I can say that we really want to write. We have a lot of stories about community resilience now, but we need more perspective. We need time to see what happened. We are still in the war, so we need time. But we will write. We have, unfortunately, many stories. Okay, we have 3 minutes. If someone wants to add something.
I just want to say that we are in the second chapter of the narrative, and the narrative is a book, and I don't think that we are even in the third chapter, and I think that part of the coming chapters will depend on what it will be going with the wider context in Israel, with the war, because I didn't touch the entire atmosphere in the hosting community. We, like the other population in Israel, are in some level of sadness, and I will describe it also depressed. We are functioning, we are doing many things, we are laughing, we are going to the theater, to concert, we are dancing, but we are depressed. And I think that the narrative of either the refugees or the hosting community is still in its second chapter.
Thank you. So I want to thank all of you for being here with us. I want to thank Michal, Sara, and Yaniv. Jan, thank you very much. And Nomika for building this session. And for all of you for merge the personal knowledge, the practice, and the theory.
Thank you,
very much.
Paz and Orna, for doing a great work for all of us. Thank you, all, both of you. Thank you all.